All right. Well, good morning. I certainly want to thank Senator Kennedy for being with us this morning. I also want to thank the countless people of this state and all of those that offered their prayers of protection for those who have been working and preparing and then had to endure the storm to try to save lives. Today, I am just elated that those prayers work, because we, as of right now, have no reports of any storm-related fatalities, and we want to keep it that way. You know, the world knows Louisiana as a loving and resilient and caring people. The human spirit is defined by its resiliency, and resiliency is what defines Louisiana. Now, certainly there are times and situations that try us, but it is also when we in this state are at our very best, when we care for our neighbors, our loved ones, and our family members. And as we begin this recovery, let us care for those family members and our neighbors, check on them, make sure that they are secure, because that is who we are here in Louisiana. And the worst of times normally brings out the best of us. We are the very epitome of a resilient people, and it comes from looking out for one another. You know, tough times never last in Louisiana, but we are, I believe, the toughest people on earth. And to that fact, I'd like to just share this quick story. You know, last night around 8:45 p.m. in New Orleans, we saw that resiliency in action. A driver in a pickup truck drove around barricades in dangerous floodwaters, and as a result, he nearly became fully submerged. Luckily, a good Samaritan, Miles Crawford, an ER nurse in the city, used to being in high-stress situations, sprung into action, grabbing a hammer from his home and smashed one of the windows, saving this driver's life. I want to thank Miles for that. I also want to remind the people of Louisiana that we put out these warnings specifically to avoid these kinds of situations. You know, as storms approach, GOSEP and our local officials and federal partners do preparation, and that preparation is meant to protect lives and property. And now we're in a recovery phase. We got a very large amount, as I'm going to bring Jay up in just a second, amount of rainfall in the New Orleans metropolitan area. That was something that was unexpected. We knew that. We said that in yesterday's press conference, that even the best laid plans always never survives the first contact with the enemy. And we saw a contingency, unexpected contingency that we had to deal with last night. The good news is that at the peak, we had over 450,000 people without power. And right now we're down to 350,000 people without power. I would remind people that for us to be able to get our utilities back online, we want, if you do not have to be on the roadway, we urge you to stay off of the roadway. If you need to be on the roadway, if you're going to work in one of those critical jobs, we ask that you drive slow and respect those that are on the roadway trying to put our services back in service. With that, I'd like to bring Senator Kennedy up for just a second, and then we'll hear from our climatologist. Senator.
There's always something to be grateful for, but that is cold comfort to our people who sustained damage. And we did have damage. A lot of wind, a lot of water, a lot of loss of power. We'll get the money that we deserve from the federal government to help us. That's why we pay taxes, whether it's in the form of public assistance, infrastructure repair, personal assistance, mitigation grants. I've already started talking to my colleagues. The entire congressional delegation is united on this. I sit on appropriations in the Senate. Julia sits on appropriations in the House. But we do it together with all of us. And we will get the money that we need. Number two, our FEMA administrator is here. And I don't see her. Here we are. I want to thank her for coming. Her technical title is administrator. I call her Madam Secretary because it is a secretary level position, in my opinion. And I want to thank her for coming to Louisiana. It really, really, really means a lot. Number three, I wish you could have just listened and been in the room, listened to what I just listened to. I want to thank the governor. I want to thank his entire team. I want to thank our state and local officials. They are on top of this. And I just wish all of you could have sat there for the hour and listened to what I listened to. The damage would have been much, much worse, but for their professionalism. And it also would have been much, much worse, but for the investment that Louisiana taxpayers and American taxpayers have made in flood protection. So thank you, Governor, for including me, and thanks for a great job.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator. And Jay, if you'd like to come up and.
Thank you, Governor. Jay Grimes, state climatologist with GOSEP and LSU. So obviously, Francine has moved out. We're done with the impacts of that storm. Still under the clouds, but we're going to stay dry. The winds continue to subside. Already, winds have dropped down to that state where response is long underway. And we're looking at a string of days that are going to be beneficial for continued response and recovery. In terms of the impacts, yes, the rains were, as the governor pointed out, rains particularly in the New Orleans area. In fact, on both sides of the tidal lakes, North and South Shore, were a little more significant than what we expected. Two reasons for that. One, the storm did take a slight jog to the east. Number two, it moved a little more slowly than we expected. And we also had a pretty healthy north eye wall as that system worked its way through southeastern Louisiana. Rainfall totals in and around the Crescent City, widespread, 5 to 7 with some 8-inch pockets there. And on the North Shore, we had some places that had double-digit rainfall. So no surprise, we had flooding around Metro New Orleans. And it's also no surprise that we're seeing minor to moderate flooding in the Florida parish rivers. The lakes are up right now, but the winds have turned around. The lakes are going to drain. And the flooding in the Florida parish rivers, although significant, is something that most of those folks are accustomed to. The waters will fall in the coming days. And again, recovery well underway. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Jay. And I'd like to bring Brandon Riswood to PSC because everybody is interested in when their electricity is going to go on.
Thank you, Governor. Brandon Fry, I'm Executive Secretary with the Louisiana Public Service Commission. As the Governor said, we peaked and our numbers are about 410,000, but that doesn't include the city of Morgan City and city of Houma. We don't regulate. But the numbers are dropping pretty quickly. At 9 a.m., we were reporting about 400,000. We're down to about 355 now. I'll give you some utility-specific peaks. Energy peaked at about 302,500. That includes Energy Louisiana and Energy New Orleans. We're down to about 260 now. Demco peaked about 40,000. We're down to 29.5. Clico peaked about 37. We're down to 28.5. Washington St. Tammany peaked at about 24.5, and we're down to 17.5. And Sleeka peaked about 20,600, and they're still at that number now. Obviously, they were at the epicenter of where Francine hit. The numbers we're seeing coincide with where landfall was. Obviously, the highest outages are in Lafourche and Terrebonne, following up the river parishes through the North Shore. The governor mentioned resilience, and I think we have some numbers that will explain the value of resilience on the electric side as well. So we've tracked for about 20 years historical numbers for hurricanes max outages at the PSC level. And there's two storms I want to point out that took a similar path. Hurricane Gustav in '08, which was a high-end Category 2, so a little bit stronger than Francine, and Hurricane Isaac in 2012, which was a high-end Category 1, a little weaker. For Gustav, we maxed out at about 1.3 million in outages, and Isaac 900,000. Here we're looking at about 450,000 max, so less than half of a corresponding storm. I think resilience has something to do with that. One last thing, the outages we're seeing now, we're still in the assessment phase. The utilities have their crews out assessing damage. That's why the restoration is coming on as they're getting out there. But the bulk of the damage appears to be vegetation related. So trees, limbs, some of those diseased from the drought. We're not seeing a lot of structural damage, but as that information gets in, we will report that out. So no big transmission losses that we're seeing right now.
Thank you. General Freeloop.
Yes, sir. Major General Freeloop, Adjutant General for the state of Louisiana. We were deployed across southwest and central Louisiana. At the light this morning, our forces moved out and conducted a search and rescue, both land, boat, and air, with nothing significant to report. It's absolutely great news story. We have 14 route clearance teams that are out, engineer assets moving, clearing roads and lines of communication for our first responders can move in. We are focused on commodities distribution now and preparing for those citizens in need that need commodities, and we'll be able to execute that in accordance with GOSEP's timeline. That's it, sir. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Colonel Robert Hodges, Superintendent, Louisiana State Police. Overnight, our troopers and DOTD partnered continuously to remove debris and trees from our area of roadway and interstates. We continue to assess damage and road conditions throughout the day. However, we still ask everyone to stay home and avoid unnecessary travel until we evaluate and clear the roads. I'm incredibly proud of our personnel and emergency responders across the state who braved the dangerous conditions yesterday evening throughout the night to ensure the safety of our communities. As reported overnight, one of our Troop A troopers outside the Baton Rouge area was injured while removing a downed tree across I-10 in Ascension Parish. I'm pleased to report that the injuries were minor and the trooper has been released from the hospital and is home recovering. As always, troopers are ready and fully prepared to respond, but everyone needs to help to ensure the safety of our communities. Thank you.
Would you like?
Governor. Thank you, Governor. And good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Deanne Criswell, the FEMA administrator. Although, Senator, I do appreciate the field promotion. I was able to sit in on the UCG meeting just now, and I think, as you heard from others up here, the amount of money invested in resilience has really made a difference, from the power outages to the number of homes saved. And it's really something that we want to be able to also lift up. But we know that there are damages that are still out there. And the pre-landfall emergency declaration that President Biden approved at the governor's request will allow us to continue to support those life-saving efforts and make sure that the governor has what he needs and his team needs to support the immediate response efforts. Today, Governor, thank you very much for allowing me to join you as we go out and assess some of the impacts. And my role here today is to really see firsthand what those impacts are to these communities, hear from the people that have been impacted, so we know what type of additional assistance you may need as we go forward. And so we'll continue to do that. My message to everybody here today, though, is one, call your insurance company if you've had damage to your homes. Take photos, collect important documents, gather all of that information so you have it ready. And then stay safe, right? There's so many additional hazards that are out there right now. And so as you're out there cleaning up and assessing your homes, make sure that you are looking out for yourself. You're also checking in on your neighbors and your loved ones to make sure they're safe, because there are so many other hazards that are out there. Just because the storm has passed does not mean that the threat and the risk has passed. And so I really encourage everybody to do that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. We really do appreciate the FEMA administrator being here as well. With that, we'll open it up to any questions that y'all may have.
Governor, how many people did we have in shelters due to the storm?
Hold on, I'll bring Judge Matlock up.
We, at the max, had around 500. We had a capacity for around 5,000 in local shelters. And we are down as of, it literally dropped while we were in our meeting. As I walked in here, it was around 311 people in 18 shelters. It's very dynamic. Through the night, we expect some increase in occupancy. People are out working. They're out helping their neighbors. They're out dealing with it. So,
Do we have any numbers on how many of those people were medically needing?
that would be my colleague, the amazing Ralph Abraham. I'm going to let him step up to address that.
Hey, Ralph Abraham, Surgeon General, to your question, there were no new movement of any patients out of hospitals or nursing homes we previously indicated the day before. So nobody had to be moved for a medical need because of that.
Yes, ma'am.
Governor, I know you said that there was a lot of flood mitigation efforts that were effective, but were there any pumps in New Orleans or levees or things that had any issues during the storm?
Look, let me just say this. First of all, I want to recognize the first part of your question in that, and we talked about it in there. Look, the federal government and the state taxpayers of the state, just what Senator Kennedy said, have spent a tremendous amount of money on our coast, working to do both coastal restoration, which I believe is in par with hurricane protection and flood protection as well. We saw a number of structures that saved a tremendous amount of property loss work. I don't know if this may have been the first time, but we actually had the Sewage and Water Board, Stephen Nelson, joined us by Zoom in the meeting to discuss some of the deficiencies in the particular system. We recognize where those systems are. I don't think anybody went into the storm believing that the infrastructure that pumps the water out of the city of New Orleans was in tip-top shape. We know that we have a power generation problem in there. We know that that should be solved in June of next year. We've identified what the deficiency was that happened last night. We're hoping to be able and working with, and that, look, the beauty of having the female administrator here and in that she got to see that firsthand. She got to understand the amount of money, she understands the amount of money that the federal government has spent on flood protection in the city of New Orleans. And so we're going to work with them to try to address that. There are some challenges with that, but we are, the legislature, both the Senate president and the speaker were there as well. But we're going to lean in. And I also think that some of the structural changes we made to the Sewage and Water Board during the session are going to help us bear fruits and be able to continue to ensure that that agency functions properly. There are some great people in there. We want to make sure that they're able to do their job properly.
We have time for one more question.
Okay, we'll take two. We'll take y'all and you. How about that? Yep. Okay.
Governor, real quick, can you just walk us through where some of the spots that you're going to be visiting around the state over the next couple of days and who you're going to be meeting with?
Yeah, look, I'll tell you this. I think y'all know the press advisory that went out and where we're going right after this. We have not mapped out where we're going to go tomorrow. What we try to do, and if you would just bear with me, what we try to do is make sure that we don't drop in an area where we strain those resources necessary to provide adequate safety to the residents in that area and to strain the local resources as well. But we will try to get that out for you as quickly as possible.
You're asking people to stay off the roads. Could you talk about when it'll be safe to be back on the roads?
When we put it out? No, look, we don't know. Look, I know that the Secretary of DOTD reported to us they're working, as hard as we can to ensure that the roadways are clear. I know that I think the report that Joe had that all of the highways except for I think the tunnel was closed at this time. LA1 just opened up. Is what Colonel Hodges said. And let me just say this as we close. Look, tomorrow we're not going to have a press conference. We're going to have a small UCG, and then we're going to go out. But we're going to let y'all know exactly where we're going for that, and maybe we'll try to find one spot for y'all to be. And I'm going to tell you why. It was always told to me that there are three key things necessary for running an effective and successful business, and the first is to have a good business plan, right? And the second is to make sure that you've got good people and the proper resources to execute that plan. And then the third key component, this is very important, is for the person that puts that all together to get the hell out of the way. And what we're going to try to do is get the hell out of the way and make sure that we have I have complete confidence in the local authorities and the people that they've elected to represent them. I have complete confidence in GOSEP. I have complete confidence in our cabinet and our federal partners. And we're going to try to get out the way to make sure that they can get the relief needed to those that were affected here in the state of Louisiana. And with that, I really appreciate it. Thank y'all.